Hello and welcome back. As is my wont, I had some things on my mind and I thought I would do a live YouTube broadcast. So this is going to be question and answer as well, so you can do that. Of course, I know I'm just now coming on live without letting anybody know, so it'll be a while before people actually get online and have questions, but feel free to ask your questions. So, what I want to do is, even though we have been talking a lot about dwarves and elves and humans and their connection between the three selves within the human being, and what they really are, how they're portrayed in the mythology and the lore, and how you can take that knowledge and use it practically. And from a shamanic perspective, actually, what the dwarves and the elves are is crucial to your ability to perform magic. And I guess we'll talk about the two different kinds of magic there are, and what it is that I'm teaching. What we can call the difference between shamanism and magic. Although, we're talking about some pretty big things there. So, I'm going to go ahead and just do some talking and wait until you guys come online. But that is what we're talking about today. We're talking about dwarves and elves and how you can practically use that information in your daily life. So let me see if anybody is on at all. Let's see. I don't see. There's just, well, you got 3 people on there. So, okay. We'll give it a little time. So, feel free, now we got 4 people on here. So feel free to type in your questions having to do with elves and dwarves. I'll go ahead and get started with all of that right now. So, elves and dwarves, I'm sure you've heard all kinds of things. This is, elves and dwarves are mythological beings and beings of fantasy literature and modern day fairy tales. We've all heard of them. The Celtic tradition have the fairies, have the fae folk. I can't speak on that because I really don't have a lot of knowledge of the ancient Celtic traditions. I'm willing to bet that there's as much misinformation about the Celtic traditions as there are from what the real beliefs were a couple thousand years ago. I bet you there's as much misinformation there as there is in the modern Germanic traditions. So just to be clear, dwarves and elves are spiritual beings that are found in ancient tribal Germanic spirituality. It's the spirituality that our ancestors in Europe practiced, specifically those of the Germanic tribes. If you're not familiar, the Germanic tribes doesn't just mean from Germany. It means, I'm speaking a Germanic language now, which is English. Also, all of the languages of Scandinavia and England. I'm sure there are other ones out there. The ancient French, the Frankish people, were actually tribal Germanic people that adopted the Roman language. In fact, what's interesting about French is, the one thing that I find kind of ironic about French and French culture, French culture really prides itself as being this cosmopolitan thing, and that the French language is this very cosmopolitan thing. But in reality, French is just, if you take a German guy and you have him read Latin, you end up with French. In Latin, if you wanted to say, like, for instance, the French word for that one really famous book and play, Les Miserables, right? Well, if you look at the way it's spelled Les Miserables. And so if you take that, which would be the Roman pronunciation, Les Miserables, and you had just some German guy with a thick accent try and pronounce it, he's going to say Les Miserables. So that's all that French is. Anyway, that's just a little side note. Anyway, I got off track there, but I thought that was interesting. So we're going to talk about what these beings really are and how you can apply them in your life. Let me see how many people we got online now. 7. We'll give it a little more time, so I'll just keep talking for a few more minutes. So, as you know, if you were to the average person, if you were to start talking about elves, they're going to think of something that looks like this. Something with a pointy hat and big striped stockings and pointy shoes and some little guy with pointy ears. I don't know how they came up with that, but actually, I do know how they came up with that. That's if you ask the normal person what an elf is, that's what they're going to see. What about dwarves? Well, dwarves and elves kind of get mixed up. The average person out there, you talk about a dwarf or an elf, they really can't tell the difference. They might think of maybe Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, which is an interesting myth. That movie, that Disney movie, actually came from a German mythological fairy tale, and it's interesting. We'll get into that, but the way we think of dwarves, besides they can look very similar to that little Keebler elf we saw for most people in their minds, but now dwarves have become a whole other creature, and that we got from our fantasy materials like the Lord of the Rings movies and video games, and so now we see dwarves looking like this. They're seen as being very strong, short, stocky, muscular, brave beings. And what is very interesting to know, and we'll touch on this some more as well, is that in modern, well, I guess let me go back a little bit before I get into that. I am going to talk about the modern fantasy notion of these beings. For instance, the elves in modern fantasy, like the Lord of the Rings and those kinds of things. The modern elf, do I have a picture of the modern elf here? Modern fantasy elf. Oh, I didn't upload it to the thing, but they look like what we have here in this picture. Like a tall, slender human with long, straight hair, very light skinned, and that we get from the Lord of the Rings movies and other types of fantasy traditions. And in my experience, what's the author of the Lord of the Rings? Tolkien. Tolkien, I actually, in my opinion, I do believe that he was channeling true information, because all myth, true myth, is not a human invention. All true mythology is the gods and the ancestors are transmitting spiritual truths through these mythological stories, even a lot of fairy tales I would put in that category. And as I've told you before, from what I've read, Tolkien's idea for the Lord of the Rings was about creating a modern mythology for the modern British people, for the modern British Isles. And of course, he drew the vast majority of his archetypes from Norse mythology. And that's because the ancient Anglo-Saxons, from whom the modern English are descended, or at least their culture is descended, those were Germanic tribespeople who had the same basic mythology as what we have in Norse mythology, which, the ancient Germanic tribal shamanic traditions. And so he built upon that, and in my experience, I don't think he realized it, but he actually shares a lot of things that are true. And here's again the deal about mythology. For the average person, mythology is very fun and entertaining and can even be very inspiring. Modern Vedic myth, modern Hindu myth is a good example. The myths about the gods are taught in the Hindu tradition, and people listen to them very intently. Now, if you were to ask them, is that literal truth? Some people might say yes, other people might say no, and some people might say, yes, it's true, but it's not part of our reality. They don't really care whether it's historically accurate or not. For them, there are spiritual truths in it. And so the way that the myth is written and shared and spoken, it will access the person's unconscious mind and their subconscious mind and their conscious mind in such a way where it will actually empower them energetically and help them to operate well within their spiritual tradition. So the same is true about our mythology, the Norse myths, and now we have I would put Lord of the Rings in that. There's a lot of other fantasy movies out there that I've tried watching, and I go, I don't like it. But when I watch the Tolkien stuff, I feel like I'm watching true mythology, and the reason for that is that he intuits truths that I don't think he realizes that are true shamanic wizard truths that you can only learn from training with some kind of a master. So, this is my tradition that I'm intuiting, creating, however you want to look at it. And I've seen within that, as I've worked in this tradition, I've seen that he's got a lot of that within his stuff. So I'm not saying you got to go out and watch the Lord of the Ring movies, but I'll give you one example. Let me just, again, check and see how many people we got, if we've got anybody asking questions. Okay, we got 6 people on here now, so we'll give it a little more time. Again, feel free to type in a question whenever you want. But let me give you an example of, I've shared this example again, and repetition, is one of the methods that you learn, so I'll repeat myself. In the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogy, you have, in the beginning, you have this fight between the elves and the dwarves. And so I think his name is Gimli. Gimli, as he's entering one of the elf forests, he starts talking about the horrible witch, the elf witch, and you have to be careful, and how he would slaughter them in a second and all of that, and all of a sudden out of nowhere the elves appear and bring them as kind of like intruders into the sacred elf forest. But as soon as Gimli looks at the elf queen, he falls in love with her. And he says that she is the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. And if you remember in that movie, as they're going off to do their quest or whatever, and the elf queen, I forget her name, is giving out little magical elven gifts to them. She comes to Gimli and she says, "What would you like?" And he says, "All I want is, I think, like 3 strands of your hair." He doesn't want anything else. He just wants a piece of her hair because she is everything to him. So you start off in the beginning that they're at war. He doesn't trust them, and then all of a sudden he loves her more than anybody. What that illustrates is the natural connection between the actual elves and the actual dwarves and what they are. And so very quickly, the elves are the ascended masters of the human race. And specifically the light elves. I'll talk about what the word elf itself means and why there's some confusion, but specifically we're talking about the light elves. There's the light elves and the dark elves and and all that, and so people aren't sure what all that stuff means. I do have some ideas about that, but generally speaking, the light elves are the ascended masters of the human race. They live in what is called Light Elf Home, Ljosalfheim, which is located in the Thunder Wheel in the northwest. And if you're not familiar with a Thunder Wheel, this is the Thunder Wheel. And so when we're working with the 8 directions, if we want to work directly with the ascended masters of the human race, we can face northwest and do our rituals in that direction. Even if you just sit facing northwest and just meditate and ask for guidance, give it a try. You'll see. You'll start to receive very subtle guidance about how to look at your life more from a distance, more objectively. So, what are the dwarves? That's what's really confusing people, and I get it because this is a concept that has been completely taken out of our modern spiritual understanding. The idea of elves is easy because we have things like saints if you're a Catholic, you have angels or guardian angels if you're a basic Christian. Even Judaism and Islam have that same understanding. So we can sort of understand what elves are if I say they're ancestral human spiritual masters. We can sort of get that. We can put them in the angel category. And in fact, I remember I put a post on one of my Facebook pages about it, and some guy, well-meaning guy, but into the basic New Age tradition, he put elves equals spirits equals angels. He just lumped them all together. And I responded and I said, kindly, because he didn't know any better, I said, yes, we do have that understanding, but actually, when you look deeply into the understanding of ancient spirituality, elves are different from angels. Angels are beings that are created by Jehovah. They have no free will. They live only to follow Jehovah's commandments, and so they are messengers of Jehovah. And that's not what the light elves are. The light elves are, even though they can act generally in that same functionality as a messenger from the spiritual realm, that's not what they are. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Before I go off topic again, we have three selves within the human body. We are not made up of one soul, by the way. We're made up of three souls. When you die, when this physical body dies, the three separate selves within you take off and go into different directions. Okay? You've got the lower self. I'm touching my navel center here. That's where we hold our subconscious and unconscious mind. It's our willpower. It's the engine of who we are, and it's where all of your reality is created. It's created from your navel center. We have completely discarded this. In fact, we make fun of it when we say somebody's contemplating their navel, meaning meditating. But that's the modern tradition, which comes out of what happened when Christianity came into Europe, all the way back to 2,000 years ago. It wiped out that understanding and it belittled that, which is why when you talk about elves now, instead of seeing them as these extremely venerated beings, you see them as this. That came again through the church. When the church was working to destroy the ancient shamanic understanding, it would, when it couldn't get rid of a belief, it would demean it. And so instead of the elves being these very powerful beings, they were demeaned into these little tiny sprites that run around with funny hats and do all that. Because that was the best. The church couldn't talk people out of believing in elves, but it could change it, and make us think that there's something else. So we'll talk about that again. So just once again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the three selves in the human body. And so let me talk about that. We've got the three selves. We've got the lower self, we've got the upper self, and we've got the middle self. Now, the person that I'm talking to now, the one that's listening to me, is the middle self, the soul, the soul. That is the part of you that your identity is connected to. And when you die, that soul will go either to the underworld in order to work off old attachments and illusions so that you can be prepared to also fulfill all of your unfulfilled desires. That's what the underworld is all about. It's not a place of torture unless you make it one. If you carry a lot of self-directed guilt when you go into the underworld, then you'll create a hell for yourself, and when you're done with that, then you can look at your life and you'll be allowed to move on. I got this directly from Hela herself, the goddess of the underworld. That's how it works. If you have fulfilled all of your desires and lived fearlessly from the heart, then you get to go to Valhalla, which is the Hall of the Chosen. You can call that enlightenment, you can call that heaven, you can call that whatever you want. Those souls, the middle selves, that go to Valhalla or to heaven or whatever word you want to use, those souls do not have to reincarnate. I don't know how many other realms of existence there are out there, but eventually they make it to the light elf home and they become elves. So that's what elves are. The word elf comes from the root alp, which means shining. That's where the name for the Alps came from. So you can imagine in going all the way back into Ice Age times, which in my belief, the Proto-Germanic tribes people were still, in those parts of Europe that weren't covered with ice. And you would look to those shining mountains, which would have been covered with ice. And, on a clear day, the sun must have just been brightly, it must have been like diamonds. So we called them the Alps, the shining ones. That's the same as the elves. That's what elf means. It means shining one. And so they are connected to that. So we have three selves. We have the middle self. Excuse me. Tea went down the wrong pipe. We have the middle self. We have the lower self, which is, excuse me. Have the middle self, which is your soul. We have your lower self, which is the subconscious and the unconscious minds. That's where they dwell. And then we have the upper self, which is your higher self. And then above that, you have the elves, which communicate with your higher self. Now, when you die, your soul goes either to the underworld or to Valhalla. Your lower self stays on the earth. And this is what ghosts are. In fact, I was just talking with somebody yesterday, a student, who shared with me something I hadn't known, but it reflects my intuition on this, which is, and in other traditions as well, like the Chinese tradition, which is that ghosts are not the soul, they are the lower self of the individual. They are the person's psychological projection. And that's the part that hangs around in the grave. And just to give you an example, people think that ghosts are souls of the departed. But when you communicate with a ghost, they either can't see you. There are some ghosts that just, anybody who's done any ghost hunting or whatever, they don't acknowledge human beings. They just go around doing things that they did in their previous life. The ones that do communicate with you don't know what year it is. They don't realize they're dead. They're still trying to do the same thing that the person was doing when they died, whether it's jumping off a cliff or trying to find, the treasure or whatever it is that the ghost is doing. Needing help. It's not the soul. It is the lower self. The upper self. The upper self will, all three of these selves come apart. Now, what's not clear to me is whether or not they choose to come back together again, or if when the soul is reincarnated, it gets a new lower self, a new upper self. Those are all things for discussion. I don't have any, major issues about that. So I'm seeing here, let me see. I think I'm sort of answering Keith's question here. Patty Ann says, where are they located? So we're going to talk about all that. So let's continue talking about that. So again, a lot of information here. I'm going to try and get to it, try and answer people's questions. So we've got three selves. We've got the lower self, the middle self, and the upper self. And for those of you who have read the book, you know that the three selves communicate in a very specific fashion. And when that communication is disrupted, that's what causes the major problems in people's lives. So, the main focus of shamanism as I'm teaching it is that when you get to a state of integration within yourself, because shamanism is all about balance. I'm not here to teach you how to become enlightened. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to help you become integrated, because the idea of enlightenment and salvation, as is taught in lots of modern religions, I think is a destructive belief, because it assumes that the point of being here is to get to this place where we are free of emotion and free of conflict, and we are love and light all the time. And in my experience, people who try to present themselves that way are in denial, or they are lying to you. Like again, the example, if you go to a fundamentalist Christian church and the people outside are, hello, welcome, praise the Lord, come on in. They're trying to present themselves as these really loving people, and what's coming off is just creepy weirdness, because they're trying to be something they're not. Being human is something to be experienced and enjoyed, and the whole point of being human is the act of finding that dynamic balance. The weather is like that. The weather isn't the same all the time. It changes. We have seasons, we have storms, we have, all that stuff. And, it's the earth balancing itself from, all the changes that occur. Same with our lives. We are constantly in some kind of imbalance, and the idea is to get us back into some kind of harmony. So you want the three selves to function harmoniously. When that happens, then you are able to manifest your intention. So the goal of being a human being, if there was such a thing as enlightenment, I don't believe in that, but when you get integrated and you have achieved a state of, dynamic harmony, which is always, changing, but when you get to that place, then you have the ability to manifest your intentions. And that's what makes us magical beings. And so, this is why wizards or shamans or gurus or whatever have this ability to speak things into existence. And the only reason is because it hasn't because they've achieved this heightened level of whatever. It just means that they are fully integrated, their three selves are integrated, and they have a sense of balance and harmony. That's it. That's all there is. And that's what makes life fun. So, I said to you that there was a very specific way that the three selves communicate. By the way, while I'm on the subject, if you haven't gotten it, I'm sure you have, but it's the first book that I wrote, and I talk a lot about these things. So if you want the basics of it, get this book here. Because that starts, we start talking about that. Again, all of my books can be found by going to michaelwilliamdenny.com. Denny is spelled D-E-N-N-E-Y. michaelwilliamdenny.com. That'll take you straight to Amazon, and you'll see all my books. You can get it there. Videos, you just go to Amazon and type in Michael William Denny, and all of my stuff should come up. So, I'm getting to the point here. The point here is, when the three selves communicate in this order that I'm about to share, then the individual is at a place where the three selves have proper communication. That is, information comes to the higher self. The higher self brings it directly to the lower self. The lower self communicates it to the middle self, you. If that communication is disrupted, then the soul starts to feel isolated. This is why you have people who don't feel the universe, who are afraid. I can guarantee you, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable, if they think the universe is out to get them, or if you believe that aliens are out there or demons are trying to possess you. And I'm not saying that aliens don't exist. I'm not saying that demons don't exist. I think they do. But if you're living your life in fear, I can guarantee you the communication is not there. Because when all three souls are communicating, you feel a sense of safety. You feel a sense of trust. You may not completely understand it, but you feel comfortable in your own skin. You feel comfortable in the universe. So this goes back to what I was saying about Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings, one of the reasons I think that Tolkien was actually channeling information and creating a modern true mythology is that in his writings, the dwarves are at war with the elves, but as soon as they see the elves, they fall madly in love with them and they follow everything that they say, because that is indicative of how our three selves communicate. Now, we talk about what dwarves are. Dwarves have their own existence, but guess who creates them? You do. You create dwarves. You have your own dwarf. You might have multiple dwarves, and it lives in your lower self. And if you, again, all of the mythology about dwarves, where do they live? They live under the ground. They're doing all of the work. And in fact, I think all of the magical tools that the gods have are built by dwarves. Dwarves build magical tools. What does that mean? It means that the dwarves are the masters of magic. They create the universe. If you go back to the Norse mythology, it says that that the dwarves, that the gods didn't create the dwarves, that the gods took the ambient life force energy that was just around and molded it into humanoid fashion. That's what it says. That the dwarves were created from the gods molding energy into a humanoid fashion. And then they list all the different kinds of dwarves that there are. Now, there are dwarves said to be guardians of the four directions, the four cardinal directions. Those are said to be dwarves. So they're incredibly powerful. And if you read the myth about All-Wise the dwarf, there's a dialogue between the god Thor and All-Wise, and All-Wise thinks he is all-wise, and he talks about all the places that he goes. And what's happening is that this dwarf comes to Thor and says he is going to marry Thor's daughter. And Thor then knows he doesn't want this to happen. And so he talks with this dwarf and he tricks him until the sun comes up. And then at that point, Thor wins because the sun, I can't forget, turns him to stone or something, but takes the power away, which is the dwarves aren't out here, they're underneath the earth. That means they're in the subconscious and the unconscious minds. And every time that you have a strong emotion, a strong attachment towards something, that emotion, if you continue to put energy into that emotion, it takes on a life of its own. And after a while, that emotion has so much energy built up in it, it will take on its own conscious awareness. This is what a ghost is. So when somebody dies and they have an obsession, or if they die from intense fear or whatever it is, or if they're fearful to begin with, the middle self is creating all this fear in the lower self. And the lower self thinks my lower self thinks it's Michael William Denny. So if I were to, which I won't, I'm saying that now, if I were to die in some kind of disarray, then that part would stay down here and would identify itself as Michael William Denny, but it would have some kind of issue or problem. That's what a ghost is. And that's, again, ghosts don't last forever. You don't see ghosts that are thousands of years old. Ghosts are usually a few hundred years old because, that's how long it takes for these dwarves to eventually shed the identity of the person that they were working for. And then they become nature spirits, and then they get a chance to become a lower self again. So I know this is probably confusing and very complicated, but that's what dwarves are. So dwarves, whether they're within the individual or whether they are nature spirits out there, they are made up primarily of emotional energy. And so emotions have energy. Emotions are made up of life force energy. This is why, I don't know if I shared this recently or not, but this is what poltergeists are. Poltergeists aren't even like regular ghosts. Poltergeists come out of people who are alive. And you know, those of you who may have done some research on it, you'll know there are case studies about this where somebody has some major unresolved issue, like a trauma, like sexual assault or abuse or something like that, and they have pushed that awareness down, and they're either in denial or they don't remember it. The defense mechanism of the mind, it's pushed so deep into the unconscious mind that they have no idea, they don't even remember it happened. Then they go to sleep, and when they're asleep, then a ghost will come and start throwing things around and attacking people and doing all kinds of things like that. When the person wakes up, the phenomenon will stop. That's one kind of a poltergeist. It's a dwarf created from within the individual that's causing all kinds of havoc. So again, that shows that there is a lack of communication between the upper self and the lower self. Because when the upper self and the lower self are communicating, the lower self is in a state of balance and wants to follow the suggestions of the higher self. But in the case of somebody who goes through that kind of trauma, the upper self is not communicating with the lower self, and that fear, that intensity, that anger, that whatever it is builds, and there's nothing to help it, and so it has to find a way to express itself. So when you're asleep, it comes out of your body and causes you all kinds of issues. By the way, I don't know if you see behind me, you see the surfboard behind me right over there? That's covering a mirror. And I do that just so that, you know, it doesn't distract from the teaching. But when I go to bed at night, I turn my mirror around. And I learned that from the Taoists, because what the Taoists say is never sleep. You know how like they make now a lot of rooms will have these big giant double-walled closet mirrors? You know, a Taoist would say that's not a good idea, because what happens is when you go to sleep, all of your organs have little souls in them as well. And what happens, just like when you're in deep sleep, your soul travels. The souls of your organs also travel outside of the body. And so when you wake up, that's why instinctively you rub your eyes and you yawn and you stretch when you wake up. Because not only are you physically waking up and getting the blood moving, but you're also calling the souls of your organs back into your body. So the Taoists would say you don't want to have a mirror there, because when your soul comes out of your body at night, it sees itself and it gets scared. So you don't want to scare your soul. So that's why I turn my mirror on when I go to sleep at night. But so this is, again, I'm just giving you back an understanding and awareness that, you know, this idea that we have been given in modern religion, that there's just the one soul within the body and all that, you know, that the whole idea of mono anything was all about controlling people. Remember, monotheism was created to control entire populations. It was the justification for, you know, Christian nations going in and conquering other people. And that was built upon the Roman justification, because the Romans felt themselves to be the bringers of civilization. So that's the propaganda they would tell their people, is that, yes, we're conquering all of these other barbarians, but we're bringing to them the light of civilization. When in reality, what they were doing is they were gaining more territory and more raw resources, like slaves and wood and coal and precious metals and whatever else they used as resources. It's the same idea. And the Roman Empire created Christianity in order to build on that. And that's even better than bringing the light of civilization. Now you're bringing the light of the one true God and the Savior, because everybody else is going to hell because they're heathens and pagans. So we're bringing the one true religion. And that was really just the justification for creating this huge giant empire. And this is what our society is built upon. That's why we only think of one soul. That's why we don't believe, you know, in any kind of life within nature, even though, even from a scientific perspective, we can see that plants have an awareness. They sense your intentions, you know, just to give you an example. And if we had a society that understood that, we would be using science to bolster the shamanic awareness, the shamanic understanding of the universe. Okay, so again, a lot of information. I'm getting overwhelmed myself. But let's go back. You've got three selves: upper, lower, and middle. The procedure with which they communicate is that the elves or the gods communicate to the higher self. The higher self communicates to the lower self. The lower self gives that information to the middle self, the soul, which is you. If those things aren't in combination, the soul feels isolated and powerless. How many people do you know? Maybe you're one of these people. How many people do you know who talk about wanting to quit smoking or quit drinking or get themselves together or make more money or find love or whatever it is, and they just can't do it? They live in constant chaos. These are people whose the three selves are not communicating. Now, it sounds very simple, and it is, but simple isn't always easy to get the three selves to communicate. But what ends up happening is when the higher self is disconnected from the lower self, the lower self then receives all of the emotional energy that the soul creates, because that's where it starts. The soul is the one experiencing life, reacting to life, and the lower self is looking to the soul and taking all of those emotional reactions. Now, if the higher self is not connected to the gods or the ancestors and is not communicating with the lower self doesn't know what to do with that information. It's like a child or a dog. And as you know, those of you who have dogs, if you don't act as the alpha, the pack leader, your dog will take over as the pack leader, will crap all over the bed, will tear up the furniture, will, run you ragged, because the dog wants to be subservient. It wants to be disciplined. It wants to be told what to do. People who are looking to train dogs are looking for dogs that are that are eager to please. Dogs that are eager to please their master are good dogs to train, because they want to understand what you're trying to tell them. They want to do what you want. And so the lower self is like that. It's like a dog. It needs to be trained. It wants to be trained. And the lower self, as in the Tolkien mythology, the dwarves, when they see the elves in their true essence, immediately bow to them and say, "Tell me what to do. I'll do anything you tell me to do." And then they go off and do all the work. And the elves, the dwarves are what create everything in the world. Everything, because they're made out of life force energy. And everything in the universe is made out of life force energy. According to the mythology, Odin, Vili, and Ve wrestle with the giant Ymir, which is, everything came out of Ymir's body. The whole universe is Ymir's body. Odin, Vili, and Ve tore him to pieces and, quote, killed him. But what that really means is that the three selves, Odin, Vili, and Ve, have the ability to distinguish and put all of this life force energy. So you yourself are creating everything. Everything that's in your external world is your own creation. Odin, Vili, and Ve, perception, awareness, willpower. These are the Odin, Vili, and Ve. These are the things that actually delineate and separate and create the boundaries with which this universe can create itself. Because remember, there's no such thing as time without space. There's no such thing as space without life force energy. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but you see what I mean? So anyway, maybe we can take some questions. See if there's anything, maybe I can simplify some of all this, but let's see. Renee Petronovich says, whenever I do Qigong and the Hul mantra, they all come calling. I'm assuming you mean the dwarves. The dwarves come calling. Should I send them away? No. They want you to tell them what to do. They're there to serve you. You can tell them to sit and be quiet. You can tell them to, enjoy the energy that you're doing with your qigong, because that's why they come. They want the energy. Here's something else. Thank you for the question. The myths are very clear that the dwarves live off of life force energy, and when you don't when you don't feed a dwarf, they get very upset, and that's when they can cause problems. So this is why meditation, energy work is so important. Again, and if you've ever done any meditation or especially energy work, at the end you take your hands and you put it where? Over your navel center. And you breathe and you take all that energy and you put it in the navel center. Why is that? Because you're putting all of your life force energy into the lower self, which is where your dwarves live. And your dwarves feed off of that energy. And when they're well fed, they're happy and they want to do what you tell them. So they're expecting you to tell them what to do. Now, the way you do that is with your intention. This is what ritual is all about. Ritual is designed to connect the three selves. By the way, the simplest way to get the three selves communicating properly is to do ritual. Ritual meaning you put the candle down, you say the magic prayer, or you say the chant, or you do the thing and you do it in different. These are all rituals. Ritualistic behavior. Things like, back in the day when we did animal sacrifice, that really got the lower self's attention, took it very seriously. And whenever you do that and you state your intention about what you want to create, your lower self is listening to you, especially when you do ritual, because when you do ritual, you are automatically channeling life force energy to your lower self. And when the lower self is being fed, the dwarves are being fed with energy, they are listening and waiting for instruction. And when you give them the instruction, they go out and do it. And so this brings me to why the dwarves cause so much havoc when people are not aligned. Because when you're not aligned, when the three selves are not aligned from top to bottom to middle, then the lower self is being starved of life force energy. And then what happens? This is all in tune with the psychological things as well. You have people who become drug addicts, who drink alcohol. You do that because those things mimic life force energy. They're the closest you can get. Now, that's not true life force energy. It releases energy. This is what people don't understand about recreational chemicals, or even shamanic plant teachers. Shamanic plant teachers don't give you energy. They release huge amounts of energy that were within your aura and your system. And so you have the experience of getting a lot of energy, but in reality, you're dissipating your energy. That's why, if you've done any of those things, your body has to recover. You can't just keep doing it all the time or you just lose energy. That's why you become addicted. You become addicted because once you do that, you create this energy deficit. And if you don't have a way to replenish it, then you go back to that. It's just this self cycle that pulls people down. So again, I'm going off on the thing here. I'm trying to answer Renee's question. You don't need to send them away. You can tell them, give them the impression, I'm feeding you energy, take the energy, and then tell them what you want. Intend what you want. And they'll go do it. Once you're done with the ritual, boom. That's why we do the ritual. You have your intention during the ritual, and then when you're done the ritual, you stop thinking about it. Reason why you stop thinking about it is because your dwarves are off doing it for you. If you keep thinking about it, they keep coming back going, oh, do you have more information? Is new instructions? And then it never happens. So that's why you put the intention out there and you forget about it. And you just trust. And, I'll talk about later on how easy this gets. This becomes seamless after a while. You don't even have to go through all the, as many steps. But anyway, let me see if I have any other questions here. Are dwarves agents in the Matrix? No, dwarves are not agents in the Matrix. Agents in the Matrix, if we're going to use that, the Matrix, I wouldn't call a mythological story. It's close to it. It's the closest people can get. There's a lot of truth in it. This is why people get trapped in the whole idea of the matrix, and we got people that have that believe that this is a false matrix. There's nothing false about this. There's a difference between false and illusion. An illusion doesn't mean it's false. False means it doesn't really exist. But the matrix is based on this idea that physical reality is some false illusion. It's not. It's actually here, but it's created by you. It's an illusion in that it is not the ultimate reality, but it's still very real. So agents in the matrix are your unconscious resistance. So your unconscious resistance, this is a very deep subject, but again, I talk about this when people work with me. When people work with me, at some point their resistance is going to come up, and it comes up in multiple ways. They sleep through their time with me. They can't afford a session. They don't like something I said. They fall in love with me. They want to be my best friend. Those are all ways that the unconscious mind tries to sabotage the teacher-student relationship. So that's part of my job, is to, when that comes up, and this is why when people work with me, oftentimes I make an agreement with them, and I say, we both have to agree that if we're going to work together, that neither of us can unilaterally change our relationship, which means that I can't decide, I don't want to be your teacher anymore. I have to come to you first, and I have to say, hey, listen, whatever my thoughts are, I'm having a hard time. I'm wondering if we should continue working. I don't know if I can help you. To this day, I've never done that. But the other happens a lot, where students will come to me and say, I'm bored, or I don't know if I'm getting anything. Here's a real common one. I just haven't had time to do the things that you've given me, and I don't want to waste your time. And I'm like, you're not wasting my time. As long as you pay for my time, you're not wasting my time. It's your time. But that's when I have the best opportunity to help you take a look at what your unconscious resistance is. When you feel like you're not getting anywhere, nothing's happening, then I can really help you take a look at it. But those are all ways that the unconscious mind tries to keep you from progressing. Why does the unconscious mind do this? It does this not because it's trying to give you a hard time. It's because it's trying to protect you. Because understand that when you are working with a true teacher or with a true spiritual tradition, you will grow. And when you grow, you will have to keep dying to old versions of yourself. This is the transformation. This is the Yuhwaz rune. The Eiwhaz, not the Ehwaz, but the Yuhwaz rune. The rune of life to death transformation. It's a death of the ego, the self. The ego is not permanent. The ego is constantly going through fluctuations. The only reason that it doesn't is if you stay stuck. Now, I'll give you an example. Again, let's talk about alcoholics, people who are chronic alcoholics. If you'll notice, if you've noticed any, they're usually very emotionally retarded. They're usually very immature. And even though they may be 60 years old, they haven't changed from when they were 15 or 20 years old when they started drinking. And I heard this somewhere, is that alcohol preserves everything that's dead and kills everything that's living. You can use it to sanitize something. It kills all the germs. But if you've got a corpse and you put it in alcohol, it'll keep it from decomposing. So that's what happens emotionally. Your emotions never get the chance to die and resurrect, so they stay frozen in time. So that's just one example. But that's, we don't want to grow, so our unconscious mind thinks it's protecting us. I could go into it a lot deeper, as I have, that, as when we're little kids, we come up with survival mechanisms, and sometimes we make false assumptions trying to protect ourselves, and then we end up with false realities that little kids have, and you have to let go of those. But those false assumptions want to stay intact because your unconscious mind thinks that you need that in order to stay alive. For instance, if you get yourself hurt, your first girlfriend broke your heart, You come up, you tell yourself, you know, you can't trust women, they're going to break your heart. You lodge that into your unconscious mind, it becomes a pattern. Then from then on, you're constantly playing this you know, this narrative of whenever you meet a woman and you start to fall in love, you say, oh, I can't trust women, they're going to hurt me. And then no matter how hard you want to stay in the relationship, you end up screwing it up. It's because your unconscious mind's trying to protect you. That's just one example. So it's starting to get dark. I'm going to turn the light on here so that you all can see me better. Okay, so a lot of information again. Let me pull back again. So again, the three selves: the upper self, the lower self, the middle self. The upper self is not an elf. The elves live beyond that, but the elves communicate directly with the upper self. The upper self communicates with the dwarves in the lower self. The dwarves are creations of your own emotions. They are, I'm not being symbolic here. I'm not saying, oh, dwarves are just your emotions. I'm not saying that. I am saying that your emotions create energetic thought forms. Those thought forms then, if they continue to stay alive, create their own awarenesses. When you look in the myths and the myths start telling all the names of the dwarves, they are psychological constructs. I can't remember all the lists now. You can go read the myth and find that out for yourself. But anyway, so let's see if we have any questions here. So dwarves are not agents of the matrix. The agents of the matrix are representative of your unconscious resistance. Dwarves can act in concert with your unconscious resistance, but dwarves will align themselves with the elves if you get aligned. That's the thing about dwarves, as long as they're continuing to work with you. Okay, I answered. Let's see here. I don't have mirrors in my bedroom at all. Good for you. I answered somebody's question here. Does this count with herbal teas? You mean I'm talking about... I don't know if it's mind altering potentially. Listen, I'm not a teetotaler. You know, I personally don't drink alcohol. I don't do mind altering stuff. You know, but I don't have anything against that. The only reason I don't do that is because I'm an energy fiend. I'm a fiend for life force energy, and I know the difference. I've done all that stuff before, and when I got really deep into energy work, celestial qigong. By the way, I recommend that. If you want to know what real energy feels like, then do this. That's the most powerful energy practice I know of, and I've studied many for decades. When you do real energy work like that, and then you go back and take a plant teacher, even if it's something that's just a mild stimulant or a mild hallucinogen, you'll feel the difference. You'll know that it's mimicking. The reason why drugs feel good is because they mimic life force energy. So let me give you another example. Marijuana. Now, I am quite certain medical marijuana is extremely good. There's all kinds of great things in there. The whatever, not the THC, but the other stuff. I take that to keep myself healthy. But even the THC has all kinds of healing properties. So I want to be clear, I'm not anti-marijuana or anything like that. But the reason why when people smoke marijuana that they feel like they are having really deep mental experiences is simply because of life force energy. Because what marijuana does when you smoke it, you have a gate here in your back, and I'm pointing to my lower back on the spine. There's a little gate right there. And that gate, what it does is it regulates energy in your aura. So you have all this energy in your aura, and what happens is that it can go through that little gate and up the spine into your brain. When you smoke marijuana, that little gate goes whoa, like that, and it sucks all of the energy out of your aura straight up and floods your brain full of life force energy, which gives you the experience of, wow, man. And that's why you focus on tiny little things, little minutia that actually in reality, again, I've said this, if you've ever been there and watched other people smoke weed but you don't, and they get all off on like their fingernail, man, and wow, my hand can grab everything but itself. You know, it's like you look at it and you laugh because it's ridiculous. But to them, it's this major thing. That's because their head is literally stuffed full with life force energy and their brain is totally overloaded. It's a lot of fun, but, you know, it will drain you of energy. Again, I'm not saying anything positive or negative about it because there are a lot of positive medical benefits for all of these things. But you just got to, you know, if you're a shaman, you got to understand how all this stuff works. Anyway, let's see what else. Any other questions that as we go through here? Does this count with herbal teas, not the store-bought stuff? I don't know what that means. Again, if you're talking about anything that's mind-altering, that gives you a buzz, then that buzz is coming from life force energy. Again, I got nothing against it. If you want to do it, makes you feel good, go for it. I don't care. I have no issue whatsoever about it. Just know that it's your life force energy, and it's mimicking life force energy. When you do, you know, deep, powerful life force energy exercises, you can feel the difference. But, you know, that doesn't mean you can't go and enjoy it. So just be clear on that. Does this unconscious resistance come from the dwarves that are not integrated? No. They respond to your unconscious resistance. The dwarves are here to serve you. So if you are not connected and you are you are following old ideas like men will hurt my feelings or women are going to hurt my feelings or I can't trust the government or whatever it is, then your dwarves are going to respond to that as a command. This is why you have to be careful. When you become a shaman, you have to be careful what you say. And you might sometimes hear me, I will think very clearly before I say something hypothetically because I want to be very clear on what I'm speaking, what's coming out of my mouth. Because I don't want to create something that, you know, isn't something I'm really intending. I'll share this, I've shared it before, but, you know, my girlfriend was saying to me a while ago, she was saying, you're not normal. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're not human. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm human. She says, no, 2 weeks ago, you were just talking out loud and you said, you know what I want, and then you made a list of what you wanted. And then now 2 weeks later, you have these things and there was no way you could have gotten them 2 weeks ago now. You're right. And she just made it clear to me that for whatever reason, I've been doing this long enough that the lines of communication are open, that when I'm clear on what my intention is, that it automatically gets created in my life. This is why it's so important. Whatever you got going on in your life, you created. You know, this is why when people come to me, especially, you know, again, people, very few people, but it happens sometimes, people will make an appointment with me. By the way, I screw up too. I missed an appointment the other day because, you know, I'm going through some stuff and I got scatterbrained. But, you know, when people miss an appointment with me, and then they want to come to me and tell me, oh, you won't believe the chaos and blah, blah, like, you know, that's an excuse. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you'll have to pay for another session. And they go, what? I couldn't make it. I'm like, that's not my problem. And it's true. It's not my problem. But the real teaching behind that is that you have to take responsibility for what you create. If I co-sign that, then I'm telling you that you're a victim of circumstances, that you are not the creator of your entire world, but you are the creator of your entire world. And when you understand that, then you overcome your resistance. Okay, anyway, I'll get off that subject for a while. Good, I'm going to start giving them things to do like find me money. Yeah. I mean, you can do that. You know, again, when it comes to money, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the secret. You know, the secret says that you you manifest what you focus on. That's not entirely true. It is mostly true. It is true we do manifest what we focus on. But then we have a problem when we've got, you know, and I know she put a LOL on there. Renee put a LOL on there. So I know you weren't being completely serious. But it's a good point. Because people get trapped in this, and if you've seen people who've really got off on the whole idea of The Secret, then they start making these lists. I'm going to manifest. I'm going to live in a mansion. I'm going to have 3 cars. I'm going to have a Mercedes. I'm going to have $1 million. And then 5 years later, they're still living in a studio apartment trying to manifest all this stuff, and they're not. Well, one of the reasons is because their unconscious mind is probably still really fragmented, but they've made the problem worse probably because they don't really want that stuff. They think they want that stuff. You know, that fear is what tells us, I need a bigger house, I need more this, I need more that. That comes from fear. Fear disconnects you from life force energy. It's important what I just said, that's why I paused. Fear disconnects you from life force energy. Because fear assumes that the universe won't take care of you. If you make that assumption, you literally are blocking yourself off from life force energy flowing to you. Disease, lots of times people will say anger is the cause of certain diseases, and I think there's some truth to that. But if you go deeper, what is anger? Anger is an expression of fear. And there's only one fear. There's only one. That one fear is that the universe will not take care of you. That's the fear. When you are connected to the universe, again, do Qigong. Qigong will connect you. You will feel the power of life force energy flowing through you, and you will start to be less afraid. Then you can make more choices. You can choose to trust. Trust is a choice, let's say that. When I work with people on the phone, and I've got... especially people, almost always when people call me as a psychic, they want to talk about relationships. Is he going to cheat on me and all that? And then, we get into the topic of, trusting him. And she says, well, I would trust him if I knew that he, and I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Trust is a choice. You have to jump off that cliff. You have no guarantee if somebody is going to return that trust or earn it. If they've proven to you by their, is another one. I mean, if somebody's cheated on you 3 or 4 times, and there's probably a good chance they're going to cheat on you again, right? So are they going to change? Probably not. But when you take that into another relationship, and my last boyfriend cheated on me, and this is somebody else. You got to choose to trust him, and he might break your heart. Or even more so, you might manifest a scenario where he'll end up cheating on you because you're projecting that through your fear. Anyway, I'm getting off on a bunch of different subjects. But I was going back to the whole thing on money is that, the reason why The Secret doesn't work when people are choosing to arbitrarily force onto the universe desires that are not coming from their soul, the universe knows it's BS. And so do you. And so, I have a prayer that I pray a lot. Sometimes I'm really clear on what I want, and sometimes I'm not sure. So, like for right now, this is an interesting thing. I've been trying to move from where I live now for months. And for whatever reason, I haven't been able to. But what I do when I'm done with my mantra every night, I will pray to the deity that I'm working with. I will say, bring to me my perfect home in whatever form that is. And what's been happening lately is that I'm starting to realize I like it here. On paper, I shouldn't because I'm, a good 20 minutes to half an hour away from where I want to be, which is the beach. I want to be surfing. I want to be able to look out my window and see the surf and pick the right surfboard and go surfing. So that's an idea in my head, but I'm starting to feel that I'm in a really good place here. I've got this little, I wish you could see it. It's this tiny little house. It's not even a 1-bedroom. It's just this tiny little house in a backyard, but I'm surrounded by gardens and trees and birds and roses. They've got flowers. I'm in the perfect place. I'm in the northeast corner of the lot, which is the perfect place for energy. The northeast is the realm of the gods. I'm facing the south. I got a window that looks out over all the beautiful little garden and everything, and it's quiet. So it's like, wait a minute. This was designed for me. This house was literally built for me, even though they didn't know they were doing that. I was the first person to move in. They built it. They knew they wanted to make a little house, and they did all this stuff from brand new, from scratch. I was the first one to move in, and it was exactly what I needed and what I wanted, and laid out exactly the way I needed it. So that's the idea. You don't know what you want. You may think you want more money, but maybe you don't. Maybe the reason why you're not manifesting as much money as you think you're supposed to is because you're actually in conflict with yourself about it. And if you stop being in conflict with how much money you have, you might start getting more money coming to you. So that's important. When you want to manifest, this is the other thing that's important. This is in the book, The Shamanic Secret to Creating a Perfect Life. I think that's what it's called, my book. That you first need to become aware of what your soul desire is. And when you know what your soul desire is, that's what you manifest. Don't manifest what you think you're supposed to have. Some people don't know what their soul really wants. So that's why when I'm not clear and I'm doing my mantra and I say, bring to me my perfect home, I'll say, bring to me my perfect income in whatever form that is. Bring to me my perfect career in whatever form that is. So I trust the universe and my lower self to know better than I do. Okay, anyway, went off on a lot there. Cannabinol CBD. Yeah, that was the other thing I was looking for. Energy overload, panic attack. Cannabis set me free from monotheism. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about power plants is that power plants are designed to crack your aura open. They're not the only way to do that. But what happens is that they release, let me tell you some other things that happen. There's another reason why people, especially Westerners, are really into power plants and spirituality. In fact, right now, 30 years ago or 20 years ago, shamanism had a very specific meaning. Nowadays, there are people who think that shamanism means power plants. And I get people, commenting me all the time. I read your book and not once did you mention plants, meaning, power plants. Because they have this modern idea that shamanism is about power plants. I met this guy, a mutual friend of somebody else, and I asked him what he did, and he said he was a shamanic counselor. And I said, oh, really? I am too. And then I started asking him what sect, what tradition, and he looked at me really weird, like he didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, so what is it that you do? And he says, oh, I guide people through, and I don't remember what plant it was. I guide people through such and such. And I say, oh, so you give people, I didn't say drugs, but I said you give people mind-altering chemicals and then you walk them through the journey. And he says, yeah. I didn't say anything, but that is not what shamanism is. That is the tiniest little bit of shamanism. But the reason why power plants are associated with spirituality is because they do two things. One, they release life force energy. They don't create life force energy, they release it. So they'll release it either from your aura, within your body. The second thing that they do is that they literally squeeze the pineal and the pituitary gland. They squeeze all of the, the God chemical, that kind of stuff. And so that stuff, all those hormones and chemicals get flooded into your system and into your brain, and boom, your aura gets cracked wide open, your chakras blow open, and you see the other side. You experience the other side. The idea is that once you have that experience, that is because before that you didn't know that there was another side there. It allows you to communicate with other beings if you have a shaman who knows what they're doing, who can protect you while you do that. But they're not meant to be used all the time. They're not. What ends up happening is that the reason why people become addicted, and I'm not talking about dependence, like with opioids, you get physically dependent and you actually go through withdrawals. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about emotional dependency. The reason why people become emotionally dependent to things like marijuana and other power plants, if they use them consistently, is because the glands in the brain don't have enough of those chemicals in them to secrete. They can't secrete it enough naturally. So for instance, when, and this is true with like cocaine and all kinds of other drugs as well, is that when these hormones, these chemicals are released in large amounts into the bloodstream, the pituitary, which is monitoring all of those chemicals, goes, hang on, we've got way too much of that, stop production, turn off. And it literally turns off the valve and you stop producing those chemicals. And so while you're on that chemical, you're experiencing it, and then you crash, right? Boom, you crash. And then the pituitary has to start up and turn it on again, and it gets all dysregulated, but it gets drained of all those chemicals. And so then you become dependent emotionally just to come back up to normal again. So there's a lot of people who, maintenance just to bring themselves back up to normal, whatever chemical it is. That's why. The reason why that's important is because when you do life force energy work, celestial qigong is one example, you start to train the pineal and the pituitary gland to expand its capacity to release those chemicals naturally. So that for now with me, like for instance, there was a long time I didn't have any mind altering chemicals for a long time, and all I did was very advanced energetic work, and I left my body and crazy things. I was telling somebody the other day the kind of crazy stuff, and I had all kinds of crazy abilities and all that. But when I experienced a teacher plant, I went, whoa, this is totally different. It felt wrong. I could feel that it wasn't the same. It felt like it was faking it. It was trying to be what real energy does to you. And it's not the same. Now, if you haven't experienced it, you don't know. But once you get to that level and you've trained the pineal and the pituitary to expand its ability to release those chemicals in a natural way, then anytime you try and force it open, it will feel totally different. It will feel like violence. And this is why the Vedics and the Taoists stopped using power plants. The Vedics, the Soma, which is in Vedic myth, the Soma is the nectar of immortality. It's what Indra drank, and they had a Soma drink, which was made from all kinds of different plants, like ephedra and who knows what else. That they created this thing in a ritual under the moonlight and all that. And the priests of Indra would drink this, and they would get high off of this Soma. But because they were shamans, they also were able to tap into the spirit of Indra, and that's how they wrote the Vedas. It came through the Soma. But then later they stopped doing that. And they stopped doing it because then they got really deep into yogic meditation and all the stuff and learning how to move energy through the body. Same thing with the Taoists. The Chinese, that's why they don't do it. It's because they've learned how to do it naturally. And they'll tell you that once you're able to do it naturally, you don't need the power plants anymore. The power plants are meant to crack you open. But once you've been cracked open, you don't need to do that again. So anyway, that's just to clear something up about that. We got started on that. Joe, is it normal to feel overwhelmed by life force energy when in deep states? I can get to where I feel open to an endless current of energy, but I always feel overwhelming and frightening, overloading. Joe, I would have to look at your chart. You're asking me, is it normal? I don't think it's normal. I mean, not to say that other people don't have your experience, because a lot do. I've had similar experiences, but this to me feels like you might have, Ketu, which is the planet of the shamans. You might have that in a specific area in your chart, and so there might be other things that you need to do to strengthen yourself so that you don't have that experience. I'd have to look at your chart. So if you haven't already, I would suggest get a Vedic reading from me. Okay, so Alicia's agreeing with me there. Thank you. See, am I done with everybody? Yeah. Okay. So enough of that. You know, it's not my intent to bag on power plants. I don't have an issue. I don't have a moral issue about any of it. I'm only interested in practical realities, and I'm interested in power. And so I'm going to do what's going to be more powerful. It just happens to be more powerful to use these things. And this is why I give out Celestial Qigong. Celestial Qigong is the most powerful thing that I can teach on video. I have more powerful things that I can teach, but I only do that in person because they're too dangerous. And I also, you know, the emotional death that you have to go through to experience that kind of power, you need to have a teacher to hold your hand as you go through that. So that's why I don't teach that. But anyway, so again, we're talking about, the whole point of this was to talk about dwarves and elves. And so understand that where I am going with this teaching is to ideally get you to a place where you can effortlessly create your life. Effortlessly create your life. And the only way that you can get to that place, not just, you know, not saying that you're not there now, but the only way that anybody can get to that place is if the three selves are in communication, number one, and number two, you've cleaned out all of the garbage in the unconscious, and that you have become consciously aware of all of the false assumptions that you have created in your lower self, which are actually working against you. Again, remember, your lower self wants to protect you. It's like a dog, you know, and I've never seen this, but I've heard that people can train dogs to be racist. So it's kind of like that. It's like training, you know, training your lower self to protect you from something that isn't anything you need to be worried about. You know, you don't need protection from people of other races. You need protection from thieves and murderers, which can be of any race. See what I mean? So the same thing is true with your lower self, your unconscious mind. You know, you have to become conscious of all of the ways that you have or continue to try and protect yourself from true growth and intimacy. You know, one of the things that I've learned, you know, when I used to do marriages, when I was in Idaho, I used to perform marriages, and I don't do that here since I've moved. I suppose I still could, but I don't. But one of the things that I would do is I would explain to the people that, you know, if you're legally getting married, I don't care how long you've been living together. Once you make a legal binding contract, something happens in your unconscious mind, and everything changes. That symbol, that ritual, even people say, oh, it's just a piece of paper, it means nothing. No, it means something to your unconscious mind. And one of the things that happens in marriage, legal binding contract marriage, is that you are forced to understand what true intimacy is. And that means that you will have to face yourself. Yes, you will learn to see who that other person is underneath all that stuff. And that's when it's like, oh, you know, oh my God, what did I get my, you know, there's no true intimacy without going, oh my God, what have I just gotten myself into? Right? But it's really about that person, ideally, is going to be a mirror for you so that you will see your true self. And so you have two choices. You can either see your true self in your own spiritual practice, or you can get married. And if you get married, then the other person ideally will be that mirror for you. And that's the struggle, because nobody is an ideal mirror, so that's why we have conflict. But the other reason is that we are so afraid of our true self. We will fight against true intimacy. And this is one of the reasons why people sabotage their relationships. This is why really trusting somebody is so scary. Because especially, maybe you relate to this. You meet somebody who's actually good for you, and you're either bored out of your mind or you're scared out of your wits, and you'd rather be with that crazy person, and it was better with the crazy person. Well, it's because the person who's good for you is being more of a mirror. So when I would do these ceremonies, I would say the job of the wife or the husband, when you make your vow, you're not saying, listen, I'm not going to leave you, I'm going to be there forever. It's not about what that person's going to do for you. It's that you are saying to the other person, when you say in sickness and in health and blah, 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 I will be there for you. What you're saying is, this marriage is going to force you to look at your true self. And I will, without judgment, hold your hand while you learn to face yourself. That's the job of the spouse. Anyway, I don't know how I got on that subject. But somebody asked a question that I think pushed that button in me. What I wanted to talk about, the point of this is that when you clear through all of your unconscious garbage, your self-created limitations, and you become conscious of them, the first thing that has to happen, this is why in spirituality they talk about consciousness and awareness. This is what they're talking about. They're not talking about awareness of other planes of existence. That's totally secondary. They're talking about awareness of your unconscious patterns and illusions and self-destructive limitations that you falsely created out of fear, trying to protect yourself. When you become conscious of those things, you will go through painful, difficult, and frightening metamorphosis. Maybe, Joe, this is what is really happening, is that when you get into these states, you're starting to tap into your true unconscious issues, and it's frightening. It's starting to come to your awareness. That might be it. Again, I don't know. I'd have to look at your chart. But when you get to that place where, not that you get rid of it, because that's not really possible. You can't get rid of your unconscious, and you can't get rid of, if you get rid of all of your unconscious limitations, then you're not coming back. You're going to another realm. You're not coming back. So, I don't see myself in that category. I can't say whether or not this is my last time around. Based on all the stuff I'm going through, I'm probably coming back. In fact, I have a belief that, anybody who says, this is my last time, I'm never coming back, I don't like it here. Well, that's a absolute 100% guarantee you are coming back. If you talk like that, you are coming back. No two ways about it. It's the people who say, oh, well, maybe I'll come back, maybe I won't. I'll come back. That's fine. It's fun down here. Those are the people who are candidates for not coming back, because they're willing to come back and do this thing, this lesson, this school that you've chosen to come to do. So anyway, I feel like I'm kind of running out of steam here, but so if there's any other questions, I'll give you a last couple minutes to throw them out there. My goal was to help clear up some understandings about the dwarves and the elves. A lot of people, understandably, are they don't know what to make of them, and sometimes when I talk about it, it creates more questions than answers. But can you come back as a bumblebee? I don't have the answer to that question, Soren. I've heard it said that you can't go back down the evolutionary ladder. Although some people will say if you, quote, sin, then you come back. But I think once you've made it to the human realm, you come back as a human. So let me answer that question real quick. The three selves. You've got the lower self, middle self, and the higher self. When we die, all three selves go somewhere else. Your lower self is destined to be another lower self Maybe to your soul, maybe to another soul. I haven't made a decision there. The soul, if it hasn't passed the test to become a higher self, will be reincarnated as a soul, and maybe you'll have your same lower self or a different one. I don't know. The lower self, when it evolves, gets to be what? A soul. When the soul evolves, it gets to become a higher self. A higher self, when it evolves, gets to either become a god or an elf. So that's what happens to the three selves. Who you are, who you identify, the person I'm talking to now, is the soul. So you don't have to worry about the other two, but you do have a responsibility over your lower self. This is why when you become conscious, you are actually safeguarding that dwarf down in your lower self to become a soul. But if you don't live a conscious life, you're kind of cursing that lower self to have to go through a bunch of garbage. Maybe you might push that dwarf out and it'll become a ghost or a negative spirit. You never know. So we have a responsibility to live a life of awareness, trying to become aware, because that soul, that dwarf wants to become a soul. In fact, I won't do it today, but we could talk about where Odin came from. And if you know how to understand the myths, Odin is not a god in the true sense. Odin surpassed all of the gods. That's why he became the All-Father. That's why he was given the throne. But he isn't a god in the same sense that Tyr or Thor or any of the other celestial gods. He's not. He's different from all of them. And it's because he started out as a dwarf. And he was I don't know that he ever incarnated, but he became the ultimate in awareness, which is why his name, Woden. Woden means he, den, en, made of wood. Wod means the fury of self-awareness. This is why Woden is the shaman. The shaman that is completely consumed with the ecstasy of shamanic awareness. And that is why Woden became the king of the gods, because of that. And that is where we are destined to go. That is why we worship Odin. We worship Odin because Odin, he shows us how to become not just a god, but to become even greater than the gods. We could get into that. That's a whole other subject anyway. Do the dwarves have a great bearing on physical health? Yeah, they have a connection to it, but physical health, because dwarves are are connected to the emotional well-being. Your emotional patterns pretty much dictate your health. That's a whole other subject. Pretty much everybody, not even in the alternative field, but even in some of the mainstream medical field, people are seeing that cancer is a result of anger, that unconscious anger that has been self-directed. And depending on what organ it's in will tell you what the self-directed anger is about. So yeah, I do believe that there is an emotional component to all diseases. But again, that's another topic. Yeah, good. Alicia is going to take care of her dwarf. Good, yeah. And just to let you know, you can work with them. The Old English word for magic was dwergmal, which means dwarf speak. Isn't that interesting? Dwarf speak. You can look at that two ways. It means that there's a secret language that wizards knew, and they spoke that language, which they could speak directly to the dwarves and get the dwarves to create magic for them. Or it meant that you simply learned how to speak to your dwarves and command them. So just to make it easier, you don't have to make a big deal about trying to speak to the dwarves, although you can. All you really have to do is Fill yourself with life force energy and do enough meditation and energy work so that you can become conscious of all of the things in your unconscious mind and become aware of them. Clean it out and do ritual. If you do those things, your dwarves will be very happy and will serve you and give you anything that you want. Create anything that you can, as long as you're connected to your true soul desire, you can create anything you want in alignment with your true soul. So anyway, that's it for now. So if you want any of these books, especially if you haven't, the first and foremost one, which I wrote many years ago, and I would probably change a lot of the stuff now, but it still turns out to be mostly true, is this one. And all of the other books, the books on runes and I don't know how many books I have out there now. Go to michaelwilliamdenny.com to see those. If you want to see the videos and DVDs, then you can just go to Amazon and just type Michael William Denny into the search engine. Denny is spelled D-E-N-N-E-Y. And I think all of my stuff, including my videos, should come up. So that, I believe, is it for now, my friends. Let me double check, make sure there's no more questions. Let's see here. Soren says, I wish you did more podcasts. Well, this is my podcast now. Podcasts are a lot of work. I got to record it and I got to upload it to the first and a half to the fourth thing. It's a lot of work. So these are my podcasts now, so I can reach a wider audience. So, but I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it. Anyway, that's it for now, my friends. Until next time, meditate on the three selves. Meditate on the idea of Odin, Vili, and Ve. Woden, Will, and Whale. Shamanic awareness. Willpower. Sacred space. That's what Odin, Vili, and Ve mean. And that's why we are the offspring of Odin, because we have the three selves. Unlike other beings and animals, we are made up of these three selves that create the human being. So until next time, my friends, may the power of the gods be with you. Let me get myself set up here so I can seamlessly turn this thing off just right. Let me see, where is it? Okay, there it is. So until next time, my friends, may the power of the gods be with you. Thank you so much. I guess I need to end this with a little plug. Those of you that want to do deeper teachings, go to thunderwizard.com. That will take you directly to the Master Shamanism course. You can sign up at whatever level you want. At the $25 level, which I think is the second level there, you will get access to private videos, 4 per month, 4-hour-long private teachings per month. We start from the very beginning. I answer all these questions and more. And for higher levels, you can work with me. I strongly recommend getting a Vedic astrological reading from me. I have been busy, so forgive me. By the way, those of you who are in the Master Shamanism class, do not be afraid to contact me and say, hey, Mike, I'm ready, here are my dates for, so that I can set up our private sessions. Don't be afraid to pester me, because I need the help getting, organized. So don't worry about that. Don't wait around for me, because I'm still learning how to get more organized. Those of you who want to work with me on a higher level, you can. I recommend getting a Vedic astrological chart, because that will tell me so many things. It will give me the opportunity to teach you how to create your own ritual, which gods want to work with you, which elements want to work with you, which directions, which worlds, which planets, and where you're at right now. It's very important, all this stuff we're talking about. It helps me to give you like a really perfect little recipe that will just work instantly. I am also going to start, I haven't put it up yet, but I don't know where, I'll figure out where, but I'm going to put up a button for a 9 world rune reading, which we've been talking about, which looks like this. And that is a rune reading for an individual, and it looks at where all the energies are in all the 9 worlds. And again, this huge, deep subject, but I can pinpoint all kinds of stuff. I've been doing that for people lately, and it's been a hit. I've been loving doing it. And so, if you want to do that, and if you've already gotten a Vedic astrological reading, but you want a 9 world rune reading, just go back and purchase it. Just purchase another Vedic astrological reading and send me an email saying I want a 9 world rune reading. For those of you that are already subscribed and are working with me personally once a month or more, you can just ask for that and we can make an entire session about that. So those are all the benefits that you get from working with me. Again, hurry up if you're on the fence, because I will run out of space soon because I only have so much time. So better to do it now than to wait. That's it for now, my friends. Thank you so much. Until next time. Right, let me get myself prepared here so I'm ready to go. Until next time, my friends, may the power of the gods and the ancestors be with you and bless you and guide you toward your path of surpassing the gods themselves.